Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Trident University Marketing Specialist Daniel Sloan, and we're excited to be bringing you today's Culture of Research and Education webinar. The core webinar series is designed to provide faculty, students, and alumni an opportunity to share their research and scholarship with the Trident community. By fostering a culture of professional development and idea exchange, participants will have access to a valuable forum for lifelong learning. This university-wide effort is coordinated by Trident's Doctoral Studies Directors. A few notes before we begin today's session. Please feel free to ask questions and share your experiences with today's subject matter. You can ask questions or send in comments on your control panel, which is on the right-hand side of your screen about halfway down. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar after the presentations. And if you have any technical issues, you can send them there or just email me directly. My email is on the screen right now. This webinar will be recorded and all attendees will receive a link to the webinar and a copy of the slide later this week. Today's session is hosted by Dr. Indira Guzman, Doctoral Studies Director in Trident's Glenn R. Jones College of Business. Dr. Guzman joined Trident. Sorry about that. Screen freeze. Dr. Guzman joined Trident in 2006, and she has been a faculty member and dissertation member, and her research has been published in over 50 academic outlets. Welcome, Dr. Guzman. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for your introduction and for helping us organize this panel. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar entitled Writing Strategies for Doctoral Research. As Daniel just said, these core webinars at Trident are organized by the Doctoral Studies Directors, and we take turns every quarter. And as we finish this cycle of webinars organized by the College of Business, we decided to discuss an important topic for all doctoral students. As you know, all doctoral students conduct research, either for traditional scientific research in the PhD programs or for the applied research done in the professional doctoral programs, such as the EDD or the DBA. At Trident, we offer both types of programs, and the outcome of a doctoral degree is a written document that reflects the contribution to knowledge made by the author. While the characteristics of this outcome, either a dissertation, a project, a thesis, are different, the type of scholarly writing and the use of evidence has similar characteristics. So the purpose of this webinar is to discuss best practices, tips, and that can help you all improve your writing skills and know where to find tools that can help you do so. So our panelists today are Dr. Michael Brizek, Professor of Doctoral Studies in the College of Business, and Dr. Allison Deegan, Faculty and Doctoral Writing Coach in our College of Education. So let me thank again to our panelists for participating and sharing their knowledge. Our first presenter is Dr. Allison Deegan. Dr. Deegan holds a Bachelor's of Science from Syracuse University, a Master's in Public Administration, and a Doctorate in Education from Cal State Long Beach. Dr. Deegan has over 30 years of experience serving as educator and writing coach. Dr. Deegan, please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Guzman. Welcome, everyone. Very excited to participate in this. I live and breathe the writing side just about every day with Trident students of all levels, and I think we're going to have a really good conversation. The first thing that I want to talk about is the fact that completing your dissertation is writing. It's essentially a writing project. You can't find great data, have an engaging study, have exciting findings, and not write it up, right? Those two go together. So you always have to think about that. But I would hope that you don't think about the writing part of it as this incredible burden that you can't solve. There's a way to address it. There's a systematic approach. And we're going to give you a lot of tips today, but as you work through the program with your chair, with your committee, and with your professors, there is a way to write it, even if you don't think of yourself as a natural writer or that writing is your strong suit. So I encourage you to put the two together. Don't say the study, the data, the analysis, and then the writing. Always keep them paired together because you can't do one without the other. And if you have great topics, great data, great things to really get to the field and you can't write it up, then your scholarship is diluted. So we don't want that to happen. The other thing I want to point out is something that a lot of students miss is that writing is very, very emotional. Whether you're a strong writer, whether writing comes easily to you, or whether writing is really a challenge, it's a lot about emotion. It's a lot about insecurities. It's a lot about confidence. And if you forget that, if you pretend that it's only technical, you can't really get there. So you have to allow yourself emotional room and also time to process these emotions, to deal with insecurities, to look for the help that you need. So always be cognizant that you might have a masterpiece in you, but if you don't have the emotional wherewithal to deliver it in writing to the field, it's never going to get there. So don't minimize that side of it. The next thing I want to talk about is the difference between master's level and doctoral level. We've all gone through master's programs, and master's, although sometimes you do gather original data, it's often focused mostly on interpreting the findings of others and synthesizing and processing that information. And when we move into doctoral writing, it's certainly built on a foundation of prior research so that we can frame our own studies, but it's original work. And you're synthesizing what's out there, but you're going to the next level and contributing and analyzing and distilling your own work. There's a lot more autonomy in doctoral writing, but also more responsibility to engage your reader. So what I like to say is the good news is you have much more freedom. How you frame it, where you choose to research, the specificity that you're going to write about. This is when you're in control of how that study goes, with consultation with your chair, of course. But then the bad news is you have a lot more freedom. You're not likely to find a cookie cutter sample and say, I'll just write mine like that. So you have to have the confidence to go forward with your findings. The same way you gathered the data, the same way you framed your research, you have to apply to your writing. So the difference is you're in an original field. There are certainly some structure, some samples, some guidelines that can steer you, but at the end of the day, you have to be the one driving this and have the confidence to put your original work forward and engage your reader. Next, I want to talk a little bit about applied writing versus more theoretical writing in the PhD. And many, many facets of doing a dissertation overlap to all kinds of studies, whether you're in the hard sciences, whether you're in a DBA, an EDD, PhD, whatever you're doing. So there is a lot of overlap, but in the applied degrees in particular, one of the distinguishing facets of our work and ultimately our writing and how we write it is that our work is very emergent. It's of the field. We are seeking solutions that can be applied tomorrow, literally tomorrow. So the writing voice, the way in which we write up our findings, the intent to deliver them to the field in a useful and applicable way requires an active voice. You have to have a sense of how your data, how your studies, how your findings will be used as you write them, rather than write them in a vacuum, in a way that's much more removed from practice. So I think that is a key difference, maybe not in the drafting of your dissertation or the execution of it, but when you're thinking about your audience, you want to always be close in the applied degrees to that active voice and be writing from that perspective. And the other facet of it is we are often writing in a DBA or in an EDD, some of the other applied degrees, from our professional experience. We're not entering a doctoral program, and rarely are we starting a whole new field that has nothing to do with our professional experience, right? So we're mining from the core of literature, the core of life experience, professional experience that we know. Again, that requires that active voice. It's not, I wouldn't talk about my work history only in a theoretical framework. I'd ground it and bound it with action words, with action descriptions, and oriented towards solutions for the field. So that should be incorporated into your writing voice as well as you go forward. Now, if you're a PhD student, I don't make the divide and say one type of work is applied and one is theoretical. Your work in a PhD isn't solely theoretical. Obviously, you are striving for field solutions as well, and you're actively engaged in gathering data from real workplaces. It's just often not your own workplace. And your target, your research target is often much more finely prescribed. So you will have a greater burden to describe theory. You'll have a larger facet of your dissertation be theoretical writing. And I think that that's going to be very comfortable. It's very traditional. It's the kind of thing you've probably done all along. But when you get to your findings, again, that's where that the application of your findings, that's where that active voice as a writer should come in. Next, I want to talk a little bit about some of the misconceptions and even mistakes about doctoral writing. I am absolutely a proponent of the attitude that writing is more about communication than it is about actual writing. And this alludes to your relationship with your chair. You have to be in active communication. You have to view your dissertation not as an all or nothing thing that you have to write and feel that pressure on your shoulders, that burden. It's a step-by-step process. It's a component-by-component process. And some students, even in the writing of it, really have to drill down to fine components. And that's, again, where that communication comes in. Your chair needs to know not only everything you can write, everything you have written, your approach to writing, your philosophy, your techniques, but they also need to know how you feel about it. They need to know if your approach to writing is productive or sometimes it's counterproductive. So that's where that communication comes in. And one of the mistakes that I made when I was a doctoral student is I was very reluctant to share my work with my chair until it was perfect. So that put me in a sort of a feedback gap. I didn't get enough feedback bit by bit by bit as I wrote. And then I had a lot of makeup to do. I had a lot of emotional strain to go through because my chair was like, where are the pages and all that. So communication with your chair and sharing things in all forms, the finished, polished stuff, the raw stuff that you're not quite sure where it's even going yet. As long as your chair understands what you're giving them and they can read it with that mindset, then the communication is working for you, and that's how you're going to be able to actually tackle the writing. The writing is a task in and of itself. I don't want to minimize that, but the more informed you are when you sit down to write, the more guidance you have both in your head and marked up on your paper, on your drafts or whatever as you sit down to write from that communication, the better each writing session is going to be, the more productive and more valuable, and you're going to be able to build the components of your dissertation more effectively as you go. And the committee is included in that. Professors are included in that. Let your chair navigate how those relationships flow and who they want reading what drafts. To send your committee raw drafts that your chair doesn't want released, that's not a good thing. That's where the communication comes in. And everything you're writing should always be building on the next. You shouldn't be stuck rewriting the same section or the same thing over and over and over again. So again, that's where that communication comes in. The other party that you really have to communicate with is a party you haven't really met yet, and that's your reader. In this case, it's going to be your chair and your committee first to get through your defense, but ultimately when we're at dissertation, when you already have data and you're writing it up, we're writing for the field. So that's where you always have to think about your reader as you write. And I encourage my students to put a Post-it note on their computer that says the reader, so they never forget that this has to be a dialogue with the reader. And the reader, hopefully, if you're writing for a journal, if you're writing for publication, for conference presentations, or even for your workplace, whatever, doesn't necessarily know everything that you went through. The reader can't infer anything. So when you write, you have to have it all on the page. You have to lead that reader introductory knowledge, fundamental knowledge, analytical knowledge, and then summative knowledge. You have to lead them through all of those types of presentation approaches as you write, so that your reader is always in a clear connection with you and that they're understanding everything you're trying to tell them. This is so that you build confidence between you and your reader. If your reader doesn't have confidence, if they don't understand what you're saying, if the citation isn't proper, if the format is confusing, if they get to say that deadly phrase, where is this from? Because they don't clearly see a chain of either analysis or citation, then your reader starts to drift away. And when your reader drifts away, it's very, very hard to get them back, to lose that trust, because they now have to slog through your whole thing with a writer that they're not quite clear about, that they're not quite confident in. So as you write, every component you write has to pass your own standards of scholarship, has to be in full communication with your chair and ultimately your committee, but also has to be intended to have that clear sense of dialogue with your reader. Otherwise, they slip away, and then all your hard work, your scholarship, isn't understood for the great value that we hope it has, and ultimately its value to the field diminishes if you can't write clearly enough to keep that reader on your side. Some of the tools and practices that we talk about regularly with our students as we write, one of the easiest ones to understand, but really one of the hardest ones to apply, is I think of it as two sides of the brain. I don't know technically, some of you neurology researchers out there might know, but I don't know technically if these are the two sides of the brain. But when the brain sits down to write, I think about flow and detail. Flow is getting your content down, synthesizing. It's the things that you just know to be true. You've read, you've studied, you've gathered data, you've analyzed, and you can sit down section by section and write about that experience. You can engage the reader. You can transition from one point to another, from one topic, one heading, one subheading, one subheading to the next, and it just flows. If you're that kind of writer, I would encourage you to write that way. Put that flow hat on and just write in that way. But then you have to go back and you have to put a different hat on, and that's the detail hat, the hat that has all those pesky little things that students like to say, I'll clean it up at the end. And I say, no, you clean it up as you go. Write for your flow, then go back, put your detail hat on, and write for your detail. And that's everything that isn't about the content. That's APA, grammar, spelling, position on the page, the way you put citation to give your reader understanding that every bit of content there is either analytical or is cited. All those little pesky things that are hard to do, that are different than the mindset we want to be in when we're writing for flow, but that must be done. And so if you're a detail writer and you're outlining and you're putting that roadmap in and you're writing under all your topics and you're getting all your stuff in and you're checking your APA as you go, you may then have to go back and put your flow hat on so that your work doesn't read like a robot wrote it, that it reads like a scholar wrote it, that's intended to, again, engage that reader. So whatever kind of writer you are, think about those two frames, flow and detail. And I would caution you not to try to do them both at the same time. I'm just going to write and I'm going to fix as I go and everything's going to be perfect. It's going to be understandable. I can't even do that. And this is all I do all day long, right? So that's a difficult task to balance both of those things at the same time, especially when you're drafting original. When you're perfecting and it's much later in the process, maybe you can do both of those things. But I would encourage you to just think of them as two separate processes. I'm writing for flow, then I'm going back, however I've got, maybe it's one section, maybe it's 10 pages, then I'm going back another time or afterward writing for detail, or vice versa, so that you're always attending to both of those important tasks, but you're not trying to do them at the same time. And what I really encourage students to do, especially on a longer pieces, is, as I said, not to save everything till I'll fix APA at the end, I'll do spell check at the end. Two things go wrong with that. One is the end is a long way from now and you're never going to have enough time. And if you then need to give your chair your draft, you haven't fixed all of that stuff. So it makes it very hard for your chair to read and understand and gauge whether this is the best writing you can do. So I am a proponent of taking a certain discrete section and clean as you go. And I say clean and seal as you go. Really, we can't really seal it until the end, and there are parts of the dissertation that are always going to be in flux, or you're going to go back to the intro when you're done at the end, things like that. So you're never truly sealing, but you're sealing as good as you can, rather than feeling like the whole thing is up for grabs. The whole thing is undone. I got to write the whole thing. That's very, very difficult. So put your flow hat on, go back, put your detail hat on, and then to the degree possible, clean and seal. And when I'm giving you this advice, the big elephant in the room here is time, because this adds extra time. To go back and clean just for APA, more time. Clean just for grammar and spelling, more time. Clean just for transition, more time. So the mechanical side of writing takes more time often than the content side of writing. The prep for the content of writing takes a long time. You have to read, research, analyze, then you prep, you write, but then you have to always allow that time on the end to do the more mechanical, the more detailed, the more cleaning work. And the reason we do it is not because, we're hazing you or anything. It's so that you can be in a near peer relationship with your reader, so that your reader can have that trust that they are reading the work of a fellow scholar, not a student where everything's unfinished. So we want to give them that template of clear, clean, concise, formically perfect writing. So all they have to look at is your data. All they have to engage with is your content, not all those other framing devices or all those other distractions. They're just there with you and your data. And if you achieve that with your reader, if your writing is thoughtful enough, clear enough, carefully tended to enough so that it's just your reader and your content, after that, it doesn't really matter what happens. You'll have a clear dialogue with them. Even if they fundamentally disagree with what you've written, they will trust you to be a purveyor of your very studied opinion and your very carefully crafted findings, and you'll have that person on your side. So we're not looking to pander to the reader. We're not looking to fool them into agreeing with us. It's not about that. It's about presenting the clearest form of your work so that they can truly engage with and ultimately decide how they feel about your content. So that's why we do all these writing things. That's why we attend to this sort of other side of the brain formic approach to get it all down on the page. And I can't say enough about time. This is an exercise of time management, the likes of which you might not ever encounter in your life again. Just when you think you have it done, you have to stop, you have to maybe rest a little, and then you have to go back for more. And it's time, time, time. So if you budget your time to research, to read, to write, you also have to budget that time to perfect, and with your chair also to consult. So this is writing is more about time management, again, than anything I could really suggest. It's really an exercise in time. If you give yourself the time, there are many resources you can avail yourself to, including an editor if you need one. If you give yourself the time, your chair is able to provide that guidance that will lead you through, and you can redo things. You can learn on one section and apply that to every other section going forward. That's sort of the best case scenario. Everything is time. So if I could give you a couple of just capsule tips as I wrap up here, they would be communication is the key. Don't ever forget about your reader. That's who all of this is for. And at the end of the day, time, 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 and find even more time. So we have some Q&A at the end, and we have a resource tip sheet we're going to send out to everyone. And so I look forward to your questions going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Deegan, and very good advice. You're right, time management is very important. I appreciate your emphasis on the emotional writing and all about that. This is all about communicating. Thank you again, and let's go ahead with our next presenter. It's Dr. Michael Brizek. Dr. Brizek holds a bachelor's and a master's degree from University of South Carolina and a PhD from Virginia Tech. Dr. Brizek has extensive experience chairing dissertations, over 60 doctoral dissertations where he serves as a chair. So we certainly appreciate his experience in sharing with us. Dr. Brizek, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Guzman, and thank you, Dr. Deegan, for your presentation. Good evening, everyone. My section of tonight's webinar is a little bit more dealing with some specific writing tips and writing strategies for a doctoral student. As you go through your doctoral courses, and also as you begin to write your dissertation or DSP, you're going to be required to develop evidence-based writing. And that is the subject I'm going to be speaking about this evening. Evidence-based writing as a term is what researchers use to define the intellectual boundaries of their discipline and, most importantly, their areas of expertise. And so it is based on literature, the body of literature, the body of knowledge within your particular type of discipline. It's also a formal scholarly tone that you need to write in, and also the non-use of writing in first-person narrative, but rather a third-person type of tone. It's also important that it is clear and analytical in terms of what you are using as far as your support in making your statements and also your propositions and addressing your research problem and questions. And it is done in a way that is providing support to those comments themselves. So if we go on to look at some other aspects of evidence-based writing, usually a key way to look at this is writing your thought within paragraph type of formats. And so whether you're writing for an SLP or in a discussion board post in your courses or your actual research dissertation itself, one of the things that you need to focus in on is clarity of thought and alignment of thought. And the best way to look at this through evidence-based writing is to narrow your thought or your focus to one paragraph at a time. So it should be 4 to 5 complete sentences based on that idea or thought. And when you change your idea or thought or move on to a next theory or conceptualization or a proposition, then you change your paragraph writing itself. In this seminar, I will be providing some examples of what I'm referring to that will show you an example of what good evidence-based writing is. But one strategy that I'd like to talk about is the meal plan. And that is one way to look at a way to structure your evidence-based writing and thought processes within each of these paragraphs themselves. And basically, the meal plan is designed to show logical flow of clarity, understanding, scholarly tone, and sound writing style in order to then develop this type of scholarly work. The meal plan consists of the main idea, evidence, analysis, and lead out. And what I will be showing you is how each element works in the meal plan strategy and how you can develop your writing style for each paragraph, for each section itself. So let's look at the first part, M, which is part of the main idea itself. Basically, this is the theme of what your main idea is, your topic itself. It's usually what we would call in research your theoretical or conceptual underpinnings of what the paragraph or thought process is all about. It is the concrete type of proposition or statement that you are making within the paragraph in order to address the research questions, the research problem, the purpose of the study, whatever the context of the actual research area is. So as an example for a main idea, the one area I put down here is coding will allow for statements to be sorted by content of the concept, theme, or event, as opposed to sorting by the individual interviewee. Now, it's supported by Rubin 2005, where it is actually paraphrased in parentheses because that's an actual statement from the literature, from Rubin itself, and it also addresses the aspect of what coding is all about. Now, if you are writing something in an SLP or a case study or a dissertation itself, if you wrote a statement similar to that where it said coding allows for statements within the concept, theme, or event and left it at that and did not support it, as a reader, like Dr. Deegan was talking about, or as a chair, the one area I would address right away is according to whom or what. Who is supporting these statements that you're making? Because if these are generalizations or generalized ideas, this could show researcher bias. This would also show an area where your statements are not valid and reliable in terms of the scientific method and also the scientific aspect of discovery itself and general research. So it becomes very important that when you're making statements, not to generalize, not to speak in first person, and to have supporting context within your statements that you're making itself. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit further about this through evidence itself. And evidence, the E part of the meal plan, is basically the exact aspect of what I was just talking about, is the source material that you're using to support your topic sentence claim. So as I said before, with the example of coding in Rubin 2005, it is what is basically supporting your idea or main theme itself. So this is where you go into, for the purpose of your study or for the purpose of this discussion, or further support or evidence to discuss the underpinnings of what coding is about or your main topic idea is about. This is where you really get into the support mechanism itself. As you work on your research project or case study or dissertation, that's what the literature review is designed to do, Chapter 2. It is designed to explore the body of knowledge and literature and also the support for your topic, your theme, your idea, and your further writing that you will align your Chapter 1 problem statement, research questions, hypothesis, etc., into the supporting literature that talks about the validity of what your study is all about. This is very important because in your master's degree programs and graduate levels about analyzing scenarios and situations and also coming to conclusions based on this analysis. But at the doctoral level, you are focusing in on a higher level of learning and also a higher level of scholarly writing, i.e. in Bloom's level taxonomy, synthesis of information. You're taking your evidence, what you have found in your literature review, what you have found in a body of literature, and then shaping it to then support your own hypothesis, problem statements, and also your conceptual framework modeling that you are doing as it relates to your topic itself, which can be kind of complex in nature and also takes that higher level of thinking in order to link all of it together, and then also knowing how to craft in a writing style that has that scholarly tone and also has the necessary support mechanisms in place as well too. And this gets into the next level of the meal plan, which deals with the A, or analysis. This is explaining your evidence, a further justification of not only what the citations are and the literature that supports your main idea of topics, but also this is where the synthesis occurs, as I just mentioned, where it presents why your decision is required and aligned from linking your literature to your topic itself. The analysis part is critical in your evidence-based writing area because you are now providing that bridge between what is known already and what you are proposing in addressing within your research itself. So example that I provided within this slide itself, dealing once again with coding, is through frequency of text codings, the proposed study will attach significance and prioritization to what was found, make sense of the findings, and offer explanations to various patterns that emerge from data analysis. You're explaining what you're going to be doing, but also addressing what the problem statement is and linking it to what supports the literature or what supports identification of that problem or issue or idea that is being presented itself. And that you get fleshed out from the literature review, and then you have to construct within your own writing topics themselves as well. So moving forward with that, then we then go into the L area of the meal plan, and this is the lead out or the conclusionary aspect of your paragraph itself. And basically this is where you go into your transition from one thought process to another. And this can also be quite tricky because you don't want to run on with your ideas. You don't want to basically continue to ramble on. You want to be clear, concise, to the point, but also logical in the way you go from one thought process to another and transition from one area to another. When I work with my doctoral students, one of the challenges they have in writing in the literature review is how do we piece all of this literature together, have it make sense, but also have a logical flow between main topics, subsections, and sub-areas, and ultimately does it make sense as it addresses the main topic or area itself. And sometimes it does become choppy or convoluted because they have a little bit of a harder time transitioning from one topic to another or one theme to another or theory to another. And it does take practice, it does take time. And that's why some of the coursework that you'll be doing, some of the projects that you'll be working on as it leads into your doctoral courses and dissertation and DSB courses will help get you into that mindset and theme on how to write in a scholarly tone, how to have this type of style of writing, and also how to become in the practice of being a scholar, practitioner, and author in this area itself too. And so what are the results of the meal plan itself once we look at the different elements themselves? Once again, what I want to emphasize is that I don't require any of my students to do the meal plan. This is just a tool that could be helpful. One of the things that I do when I work with doctoral students is I have many different types of templates and guides and different aids that help in writing development and also research itself. Some I've created and others have been able to use from my colleagues themselves. So this is just one element of this aspect itself. But what it does is it provides that framework or mindset to basically prepare how to write paragraph per paragraph form, how to get those types of scholarly tone and writing that you want to have, and also do it in a way that the reader, like Dr. Deegan was talking about, and other scholars can relate to, understand, and conceptualize the type of message that you're trying to deliver with either presenting new ideas, theories, concepts, or also testing and testing and validating different forms of your research itself. So as a final result of the meal plan here, as an example, this would be a good paragraph that you would write in this aspect, which coding will allow for statements to be sorted by content of the concept, theme, or event, as opposed to sorting by the individual interviewee. This shows the main idea. This is the M part of the paragraph itself. And then the evidence, it talks about what you're trying to do. What are you trying to explain in trying to accomplish this particular topic of coding itself? So for the proposed study, frequency of the text context will be used. Through the frequency of text codings, the proposed study will attach significance and prioritization to what was found, make sense of the findings, and offer explanations to various patterns that emerge from the data analysis. That's your evidence. And then you get into the analysis part, and then also the lead out part, which gets into from the coding patterns and the data will emerge representing themes, categories, and possibly exhibit characteristics of a single loop and double loop learning. That will conclude that aspect which ties everything into the theme of coding itself. Then the next paragraph might possibly get into variations of coding or other items to consider dealing with coding or programming itself. But you can get the type of flow, as you can see, with the writing itself, all supported by in-text citations and literature that validates by whom or what are supporting these ideas, and how you also are yourself are articulating what the body of knowledge is explaining and how you are analyzing that and crafting your own message within your research writing itself. So going further, and I showed this in some examples with paraphrasing in the aspect of that as well. Paraphrasing is also important because you are capturing, especially in a literature review, important concepts or important ideas themselves. So you're taking a phrase or sentence in words and capturing that meaning and citing it properly. So when you're writing your dissertation, it's important to have actual factual information, citations, and information from the literature, and have it written and articulated clearly. Now, my personal rule of thumb with paraphrasing is, especially a literature review, should not be all paraphrasing, because we want to see synthesis, we want to see your articulation of your idea. I like to see a blend of paraphrasing and mixing of ideas, especially when paraphrasing supports your main ideas or topics or your research problem that you're presenting itself. And so it takes a little bit of a practice to get the balance between paraphrasing, citing appropriately, and also presenting your own thoughts, your own conceptualization, and writing in the scholarly tone itself. When you do have a recording of this, we also have some of the handouts that'll be available later. A great link on paraphrasing is listed below. It's a PDF document. It's a good resource to look at as some tips on how to use paraphrasing, when it's appropriate, and how it can be incorporated in scholarly writing itself. So moving on to critical and analytical thinking itself, and this ties in a little bit more with Dr. Deegan's section as well too. Remember, when you are writing and you are making propositions and statements, it needs to be supported and substantiated by facts and interpreting those facts according to whom or what. And so you want to avoid conjecture, you want to avoid bias and opinionated aspects. Some topics might be controversial and might be exploratory in nature, but you still have to have foundational evidence to support why your ideas are moving in that direction as well too. And overall, remember that all these types of writing tips and the way to think and the way to have critical and analytical thinking, it's a work in progress. It takes time. I'm a journal editor, and I've worked, in 20 years for academia, and I'm still learning new processes. I'm still working and refining my craft. I'm still trying to write better. I'm finding new ways to use statistical and analytical tools and incorporate that into my scholarly writing. It's an evolutionary, ongoing process. And so and your perceptions will change, your styles will change, your ability to articulate in your writing will change over time. The more exposure you get to critically analyzing articles, peer-reviewed journal articles and scholarly articles and information and data, this will also help shape your critical and analytical thinking and your writing style as well too. So research is an ongoing, evolving process. It's not something that you just take a course and complete and now you're a scholarly writer. It is a process that never ends, but there's always ways and aids and tips that can always help and shape and mold the way you can to be a stronger critical analytical thinker itself. But the best thing to think about in critical and analytical thinking is question everything. Always look beyond the layers of the onion. That's what I always like to say. Never take things for face value. Look deeper into the research problem or the literature or other people's views or opinions to get a holistic 360-degree view of many different forms of information, ideas, and theories in order to shape your own thought process, synthesis of information, and your writing style itself as well. So to further talk about the qualities of an evidence-based writer to conclude with in the next section. This also talks a little bit along with Dr. Deegan as well. A couple of strategies to add to that is time management, as Dr. Deegan said. Manage your time or it will manage you. Some of my most successful doctoral students over the last 10 years or so and the 60 that I've graduated plus had a very regimented schedule. Yes, they have families, professional lives, other activities and challenges along the way, but some of my students that have devoted at least an hour, 2 hours at least per week, strictly just writing on their dissertation, their research, etc., and holding themselves to it no matter what, maybe even some a little bit more. I've had students that have devoted, a day, like Sunday was their day, and they devoted 8 hours to it. But they had the support, accountability partners that would help them, whether it was a spouse or whether it was a friend or another colleague. This family would support them and help them with the time and giving them the time and the quiet space to write. But you have to have a system in place. It just cannot be willy-nilly. You have to have structure in place as far as time, whenever that time may be, whenever hour it may be, days, frequency, etc., in order to get into that regiment, in order to manage your time and write in a quality way as well too. Remember, critically thinking, it's not just thinking outside the box, it's thinking all around the box. Like I said, peeling back those layers of that onion, looking at areas and not just taking it for face value, but looking at other aspects, other arguments, other theories, whether they contradict or whether they support, and getting a full view, a full picture of that topic and idea as well too. Other things, of course, proofing, editing, going through that process itself, making sure that you're staying true to the format, style, and writing. Here at Trident, we provide many different types of support mechanisms, many different types of templates in your courses. You will also get supplemental material to help you with the structure of writing your documents and also your research style itself. So use those as an advantage. Use these webinars as an advantage. Use your chair and mentors as an advantage in the faculty. Work with them, communicate, work through your problems and problem areas in your research that can help get some ideas and perspectives on that, and also help with the refinement of your writing style and the quality of your writing as well too. And now we will turn it over to question and answer for this section as well too.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Dr. Brizek. Good advice as well. I mean, we definitely have to look for ways to customize and select the best system that will fit your needs, your time management, and interest. So thank you very much again, both of our panelists. And Daniel, we're going to go ahead and we're open to the questions from our audience.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Guzman. Thank you, Dr. Brizek, and thank you, Dr. Deegan. A lot of positive comments about the presentation and also several questions already. And as a reminder, for those of you in the audience who do have questions, you can submit them via the question box on your control panel. I know a few of you have your hands raised, but it's more effective just to type your questions into the question box that way. And first question, this one is for you, Dr. Deegan. And you talked about emotionally connecting to your writing. How can one go about doing that if they've always viewed writing as kind of a very boring, straightforward task?
Come on, writing isn't boring. I think some people view it as boring and they distance themselves from it because it's challenging for them. And when I talk about the emotion, I don't mean you have to put your emotions on the page. I think you have to attend to the emotions that come up when you write. And they're typically around lack of confidence. When you're unconfident, you don't want to let the world see that. And the world sometimes includes your chair. So I would encourage you to share your fears. I feel like I sound too robotic. I feel like my findings are so rich, but I can't get it on the page. I read these other samples and that's not me. How do I do it? And there's a way to manage those emotions and break your writing down into steps. I think Dr. Brizek's approach of do this, do that, build this on that, you know, just that step-by-step way to do it, the way to think about it can help you manage those emotions. What I don't want students to do is act as if that side is never going to come up. It doesn't happen for all students. Some are you know, they're really confident writers. They can just tackle it. They can take great advice and everything just flows. And it seems like, oh, they're such good writers. It's easy for them. Frankly, it's never easy for those students. They just manage it better. But if that is not your forte, if this is giving you, you know, a lump in your throat and you don't know how you're going to go forward, manage those sets of emotions and communicate with your chair. Find strategies. You may have to work in smaller bits. You may have to be left alone for longer bits. You may have to get feedback from an editor before it even gets to your chair, so you feel like you're having a conversation with your chair based on the ability you're really able to rise to. So the emotions are not really about, you know, you're an emotional person and writing is emotional. It's the emotions that come up when you feel that fear, when you feel that lack of confidence. The other little tip I'll give you is managing these emotions, communicating with your chair. All of that gets back to time. It all takes time. You can't do this the day before a huge deadline. You can't do this when your lack of progress is going to impact your ability to get your data or liaise with the site you're gathering data from or whatever. So managing the emotions all along the way also takes time.
And can I also add to that? Okay, you also have to be passionate in your topic. Okay, part of writing is being passionate in what you're doing, and whether it's in your concentration of what you're working on, your subject matter that you're working on, it's got to be something that you really feel strongly about. And remember, not only are you becoming a scholarly writer and practitioner, but we are developing you to be a subject matter expert in your respected field as well too. And so you really have to be immersed and involved in what you are working on, and to become that expert in your field and also very knowledgeable of what you're doing as well too. So just keep that in mind as a strategy through research and writing as well.
Great, thank you. Dr. Brizek, next question I have for you. I had another question lined up. I'm going to slide this one in there because you mentioned the word passion. And the question is, how can one reasonably write something to be passionate about it when it may go against someone's beliefs?
That's a great question. I from time to time have written scholarly articles that could have been deemed as controversial at times. Might have been an area that not everyone agreed with, but I wrote those articles to bring up debate and argument in that topic as well too. One of the things that I mentioned this a little bit in my presentation already is part of your process in your research is discovery. And so you might come into a topic or an area where you have preconceived notions or a belief system that might not necessarily be aligned with the current practices or topic of what as it relates to that particular problem statement or area. But as you dive deeper into those layers, like I mentioned, and you look at other aspects of it, other viewpoints, other types of psychological and social boundaries that occur, it might reshape the way you feel about that topic, and or even validate and solidify your statements, which then you can write about as well too. What you want to try to avoid, though, is as much personal bias as possible, and guide yourself towards the supporting literature and the validated data and information that supports that particular topic itself. And then you'll have to wrestle with the conclusions and outcomes that occurs. This happens frequently in clinical testing all the time, in what I would call the harder sciences. And sometimes the outcomes of the testing is demoralizing. It could be troubling at times. But part of being a researcher is also weighing some of those ideas and aspects in order to come up with conclusions that benefits all and adds to that body of knowledge itself.
Great, thank you. Next question. This one's for you, Dr. Guzman. From the PhD perspective, at what stage in the program will the student be directed to form the dissertation committee? And does the department assist in this process?
Well, in the PhD programs, the students in the College of Business, students start working with their dissertation chair right after they take the qualifying exam. So the first step is the qualifying exam, and that's where after they pass, then they will start working with the chair.
Thank you. And let's go back to Dr. Brizek for the next question. And that is, you talked about being regimented when writing, but is it wise to set up time to write or research every single day? For example, if one would get up at 5 and write until 7, because quote unquote, I think writing for only 2 hours per week will take forever to get a dissertation completed.
There are different ways for everybody. I'm not going to prescribe an exact method or way because everybody is different, but you do have to have a system in place. And whether that is doing it from 1 to 4 o'clock in the morning, don't necessarily recommend that, but maybe some people are night owls and they do better thinking at that time, or that you get up at 5 instead of 7 every morning and devote 2 hours a day every day. It's not necessarily the quantity or the time, but putting in the time and making the best use of your time. Where people get stuck is they say, I got a lot going on this week. I'll work on it next week. And then next week comes, they go, I got to go out of town for business. I'll start reading this or working on this or writing this chapter the following week. And it starts to snowball. That's what you definitely want to avoid in your writing and time management. Don't procrastinate. Don't put it off. Challenges and barriers do get in your way, but you have to be regimented and stick to some form of schedule itself too. The other thing I recommend besides having support around you and accountability partners is give yourself rewards or you're going to burn out. So when you complete your writing of chapter 2 or a particular chapter itself, the chair likes it, the committee likes it. They say, okay, you can move on, or you complete your prospectus and it's time to move on to the next phase. Go out with your spouse, hit the night on the town, take a weekend trip, do what you like to do and celebrate your milestones and accomplishments along with doing it in an academic sense as well too. That will reinvigorate you and keep you focused and on track, hopefully, to continue the development of your work itself too. That's very important to have that balance as well also.
Can I add a little bit to that?
Yeah,
sure. To that comment? First is that I tell my students they have to be what I call time warriors, right? And they have to say no to everybody. There's no other way to do it. You can't fold this into your spare time, no matter how organized you are. There are going to be some times when you just can't be where you are usually available, whether it's work, family, other, community, other responsibilities and things of that sort. And this is not the time to have it be business as usual and try to fold it in. So that, again, more time has to come your way. I have many, many students who feel they can set up a schedule and say, I'm going to do it all day Sunday, and I'm going to preserve, 12 hours of Sunday. And that sounds great. Sunday, you might be in a coma, and you might be so tired you can't even think. And your family is looking at you saying, I thought you were going to be working today, and you're just sort of paralyzed. So you can set all the dream schedules you want, but they have to accommodate fresh brain time. They have to accommodate a well-rested brain, and you might be better off in smaller bits of time, 3 hours, 3 times a week or 4 times a week or whatever, than all day Sunday, or I'm going to go to the library Sunday or whatever. So keep that in mind and try a few ways that it works. And if you're in a certain facet of your life, a big work deadline or big family obligations or whatever, you might have to readjust. And this week you've got to do snippets. Next week you can go back to long blocks of time. But at the end of the day, you're not going to get through this program without saying no to many people multiple times, to give yourself that space to write. Because this isn't a dog trick, fetch, sit up. It's writing. It's very complex. It's very multi-layered. You need all the time to prep and even prepare you to write. Then you need to write, and then you need the mechanical time to clean your writing. So it requires a lot of time, and you will be saying no. You will be stealing time from everybody. And the good news is it's not permanent. This is a temporary cycle that you're in. If you're an academic, you're going to be in a version of this forever, and you'll have to manage it. But as a doctoral student, this phase of it, when you're trying to do everything, spin all those plates, right, is not permanent. If you privilege writing, if you put it first, you'll get it done. That's how you get it done. And one more little tip I'll give you is, I have never met an entirely ego-driven, selfish doctoral student who just wants to get those initials after their name and challenge the world. This is usually a pursuit for the greater good. We come here because we want to make improvements in our work, in our communities, in the field of scholarship in general. We want to make the world a better place. So that requires sacrifice. It doesn't come easily. It's not an indulgent thing for you to do for yourself that's taking time away from your family or your work. It's actually an investment, a social investment in the greater good. So it requires sacrifice. Don't guilt yourself into a corner where you're not giving it the time it needs. Give it the time it needs. Let your writing really be the priority, and it won't be forever. You'll be done, and you'll survive it that way, just more reasonably than trying to continue to do everything for everybody and always put your writing last.
Thank you. That's some really great advice, everyone. And we do have one more question. And if anyone else has any last-minute questions, please get them in through the control panel now. And this last question is for you, Dr. Brizek. You mentioned questioning everything while reading. Can you give an example of effective ways to do that while reviewing a case study or published research?
Sure. I'm not going to make this a political statement because I'm smiling right now. You know, the journalism and news right now, and what is real and what is fake. But what I will say is when I look at information and data, whether it is through what's out there right now or through literature or peer-reviewed journal articles, I never take one article as face value. I look at the article, its contents, and then I'm going to look at the references, who they refer to, the pattern of the authors that they were referring to, and some of their own research. And I'm going to look at basically what other authors are either supporting or arguing against based on that topic as well. And so, you know, remember, you can get 100 academicians in a room and they might come up with 200 different ideas on the same topic. There's no set idea or pattern that says this is actually the way it is and always will be. So I always want to look at many different articles and many different ideas and propositions as I go through a particular area. My background is competitive strategy, formulation, and implementation, along with innovation. There are hundreds of different authors with different viewpoints and theories, both seminal and also contemporary in nature, that might look at a particular subtopic area in strategy and have different viewpoints. I'll incorporate all those different areas and viewpoints and then formulate my own viewpoints based on the supporting literature for, against, or creating new information based on the pattern of those ideas and theories themselves. And that's what you have to look at as a scholar and a practitioner and a researcher, is not just look at one viewpoint or one narrow aspect, which is very myopic, and say that's the way it is. You got to look at other aspects as well too within the context of that subject matter itself.
And one more comment on that. This also gets back to confidence. I remember, like it was yesterday, this moment when I was a doctoral student, in the very first semester, we were learning about research articles and looking at this and that. And the point came when I came upon an article, in a very esteemed journal and all fancy looking and perfect. And I started reading it and I thought two things. I'm like, I don't agree with this at all. And then I thought, this is really badly written. And I was sort of looking around. Does everybody agree with me, or is everyone just taking it as this sacrosanct content? And we learned that we were allowed to be critical readers. And that's where you start to develop your own sense of what is useful to your thesis, what is useful to the things you're passionate about. And it won't be everyone. You're entitled to, reject is sort of a wrong way, but you're entitled to find very well-respected scholarship not useful for you and not resonant for you. And to develop that confidence, you have to be reading a lot and you have to be writing a lot. You have to understand where that person is coming from and be able to dissect what they're presenting and see how useful it is. That's hard to do only as an external person, not as a fellow researcher and writer. So you will get to that point where you can be discriminating about work that you find, and that gets right back to that question everything and don't be spoon-fed things, because remember, you're going to be contributing a new layer on top that maybe no one has ever talked about, or points that no one has ever connected before, and it's going to be subject to that same type of scrutiny and review. So you can be appreciative of the things that you digest as a reader yourself, but you have to build toward that confidence so you can contribute to that dialogue, whether people agree with you or not. That's part of the process. So I think that fits together nicely, but build your confidence in your own work, and that will help you be more discriminating about the work of others.
Great, thank you. And so that concludes our Q&A section, and now I'm going to hand things off to Dr. Guzman to close things out for tonight.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Just to add up a couple of comments. One is based on the discussion that we just had. We want to emphasize again on having the passion for your topic, because that's the only way that you will really enjoy writing about what you're writing and reading about what you are writing in your dissertation. So make sure you select and work on a topic that you really have passion for, and you build in the experience that you already have. And that's what we emphasize in our doctoral programs. So I hope you got all this great advice. Thank you everyone for attending, participating in today's core webinar, the writing strategies for doctoral research. A special thanks again to our panelists, Dr. Brizek and Dr. Deegan, as well as Daniel and Lina from our marketing department for their help, and everyone for participation and interest in this topic. Let's continue building knowledge, and we'll be sending you the link to the recording of today's session and the slide deck later this week, or next week, Daniel, as you said. And let me also mention that we have, here you have the information that you can contact us, as well as the next core webinars. The next core webinar will be later this month entitled Developing a Dissertation, Practical Tips for Success. See the chat box for the link to sign up. And if you would like to reach out to today's presenter or myself, our contact information is on the screen. So again, thank you very much, everyone, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.